Washington, ghost-like objects dart across the radar screen at the CAA Traffic Control Center at National Airport for several hours, traveling more than 100 miles an hour. Air Force jet fighters spend several hours chasing the objects plotted on the radar scope.
Something else is out there.
There's something else out there, okay.
Of all the banks and braes of bonny Scotland, none holds more fascination than the murky waters of Loch Ness.
Tell me, do you think there is life on other planets?
Well, I'm not quite sure, but I suppose there would be.
No, he seems definite. You seem
Definitely.
definite about it. How do you see this life and where?
Oh, I've seen a flying saucer.
Blackwater Media presents Darkfall. Real-life encounters with the paranormal and the unexplained. I'm from Texas and have been living in Austin for about 10 years when I got this job doing healthcare in Round Rock, which was a smallish town north of Austin. This was in the early 90s, and although I've not been back, I'm very sure that this whole region has changed dramatically. I would do home visits with clients who lived throughout the area, not just in Round Rock. Some clients lived a bit far, maybe an hour or more away from the office. At the end of each day, I had to drop off files of the clients I worked with. Sometimes I worked until 9 or 10 at night. I had a lot to learn about getting around the area. I was not at all familiar with Round Rock, the roads and highways, and all of the small towns nearby. There was one thing I was told by my supervisors and coworkers right up front and repeatedly. Do not take Harryman Road, ever, but especially not at night. There are a lot of streets with crazy names in Texas, so I didn't think much of it, and I assumed that street was either in disrepair or had something like a bad blind spot or a difficult turn, etc. As time went by, I eventually asked a little bit more about Harryman Road, and I was told that it was a shortcut from one main road to the office, that it also cut a good 20 minutes or more off the trip to and from the office, but it was very narrow, and it went along a creek. I think it was called Brushy Creek. One person told me that there were stories of an actual hairy man living on or near that road. She told me that there were old stories of a child who got separated from her wagon train during the days when the Chisholm Trail was still used to drive cattle from Texas to Kansas, and that the boy became feral and killed animals for food, and sometimes killed people. She also said that some people thought that there were Bigfoot in the area, and that's the actual hairy man people have seen. I found that fascinating, but on a more practical level, I also learned that parts of Harryman Road were so narrow that only one vehicle would fit. Since most people in the area own trucks, I just put the idea of ever taking the Harryman Road shortcut completely out of my head, until one day in the fall. One night, after a very long day working with clients and driving all over Central Texas, I realized that it was already 10 p.m. and I still had to drop off the files at the office. The first real cold front of fall was coming through, and after a typical, very long and super hot summer, I just wanted to get home and chill, literally chill, and relax outside in the much cooler weather. As I was driving back to the office, I came to turn onto Harryman Road. I hesitated because I knew better than to take that shortcut, but then I thought, how bad could it be? And this night in particular, I really just wanted to get work over with and get home. So I turned onto Harryman Road. And I quickly realized that, yes, this road is narrow and does go right along the creek. I mean, right along, butt up against it. I could see that it would be easy to drive off the road and into that damn creek. So yeah, that was troubling. Then I realized that there were no streetlights on this road. As I went further along the road, it became more like a small canyon, and that made the road even darker. There were rock walls on both sides that went up anywhere from a few feet to maybe 20 feet. And since the weather was changing, the temperature was dropping sharply. The cold air moving over the warm creek water was creating fog. As I went further into the canyon-like area, the smoky mist got much more dense and widespread. Of course, I had my headlights on high, but I could barely see. It got to the point that I must have been driving around 10 miles an hour at most, and I was scared that I would either drive into that creek or hit the rock wall. So I wasn't looking at my speedometer anymore anyway. I realized what a mistake it was to turn onto Harryman Road. I could barely see the road, and this was not the shortcut I was hoping for. Then I noticed something that looked like red or brown liquid shining on the road, which I thought must have been paint. Maybe a can of paint recently fallen off a truck. Then I noticed small things glistening in my headlights. I don't know how to describe them. Small rags soaked in red paint, maybe? Now, initially, I wasn't concerned about seeing these things. I didn't think it was strange until the small things got bigger and no longer looked like rags, but more like chunks of fresh meat. I was driving, or rather rolling even more slowly at this point, and I was trying to figure out what the hell I was looking at, until I saw what clearly seemed to be guts, intestines and organs, and then maybe even parts of arms and legs. And I was like, what the fuck? What happened here? I was so scared, but I kept driving. There was no way I was going to stop, because at this point, all I wanted to do was get the hell out of there and back to civilization. Then I saw what I instantly recognized as a rib cage. A goddamn rib cage, and I just about lost my mind. But I kept rolling, and as I rolled over it, I could hear the ribs cracking. I was beyond freaked out and frightened, and somehow kept going for what felt like an eternity. The road cleared up after the rib cage, but my mind was going wild with possibilities. Was that an animal or a person? Was that some kind of freak accident? Was someone's body dumped there? Was that a victim of Harryman? What the hell was it? I finally got back to a, quote, real road, and to the office where I dropped off the files and called the police. And well, that part of the story is long and boring. I'll just say that the official story the police eventually told me was that it was a deer that someone else hit with a vehicle. And I thought, really? What car or truck could mangle a deer like that? And on a road that you have to drive slow on? That was 10 kinds of bullshit. To this day, I'm convinced that the deer had been killed and eaten by a Bigfoot. Bottom line, if for whatever reason you find yourself in that part of Texas, stay the hell away from Harryman Road.